Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we will dive into the devastating existential tragedy of Sheila Carter's catastrophic cliffside crash and the paralyzing guilt that is currently suffocating Deacon Sharp and Taylor Hayes. There is a specific haunting quality to the artificial lighting used in the hospital sets of this show, a sterile, unforgiving fluorescence that casts long, bluish shadows against the faces of characters we have watched age for decades. I noticed it immediately today. Before a single word of dialogue was spoken, before the rhythmic, mechanical hiss of the ventilator filled the audio track, I found myself staring at the hollowed-out expression on Deacon Sharp's face, bathed in that terrible synthetic light. It was a look of utter, profound ruin. And as I sat there, watching the screen in the quiet isolation of my living room, I felt a strange, heavy ache settle into my chest. Let's be honest about what we just watched. We did not just witness a dramatic soap opera twist. We watched a terrifying manifestation of human fragility, a brutal reminder of how easily a mind can shatter when the last fragile thread of hope is severed. It dawned on me today, as it often does when this show pushes past its own campy boundaries into the realm of raw psychological horror, that we are not merely viewers. We are voyeurs, complicit in the endless, cyclical suffering of these deeply broken people. To understand the magnitude of Sheila Carter driving her car off a cliff along the Malibu coast, we must first understand the pathology of her despair. This was not a calculated act of revenge. This was not the Sheila of the 1990s, armed with a weapon and a twisted master plan. No, this was the terrifying collapse of a woman who had finally, unequivocally, run out of delusions. When Sheila signed those divorce papers, the ink drying on the legal termination of the only genuine acceptance she had ever known, something fundamental broke inside of her. And then, the final, fatal blow, witnessing Deacon publicly declare his love for Taylor Hayes. It is one thing to lose the person you love. It is an entirely different, uniquely agonizing trauma to watch the person you love elevate someone else to a pedestal of purity that you could never, ever reach. Sheila turned to alcohol, a desperate, clumsy attempt to numb a pain that is fundamentally unnumbable. The bottle is such a tragic, mundane coping mechanism for a woman who has spent her life orchestrating grand, operatic schemes. But grief reduces us all to our most basic, primal needs. She just wanted the hurting to stop. I find myself wondering if anyone else feels this strange ache when they think about Sheila behind the wheel of that car. The Malibu coastline is a place of stunning, aggressive beauty, yet it has served as the graveyard for so many Forrester and Logan tragedies. The winding roads, the sheer plunging drops into the churning, indifferent ocean below. I can almost see the scene playing out in the theater of my mind, the erratic swerving of the vehicle, the blinding glare of the headlights against the encroaching fog, the overwhelming, suffocating silence of a car in freefall. She did not hit the brakes. That is a detail that haunts me, the absolute, terrifying surrender to gravity. Now Sheila lies in a hospital bed, trapped in a vegetative state. The doctors call it a coma, I call it purgatory. And as a longtime viewer, I cannot help but acknowledge the metatextual reality of this moment. We know, outside the confines of this fictional universe, that Kimberlin Brown is taking her immense talents to Genoa City, stepping onto the set of The Young and the Restless. Her departure necessitates this absence. But within the narrative, this coma is not just a plot device to accommodate an actor's schedule. It is a profound, lingering ghost story. Sheila will remain in this bed, unmoving, unspeaking, for months, perhaps years. She has been transformed from an active agent of chaos into a silent, breathing monument to Deacon's sins. And Deacon, my God, Deacon. The psychological devastation of Deacon Sharp is perhaps one of the most compelling, heartbreaking arcs this show has ever dared to explore. Here is a man who has spent his entire adult life scraping the bottom of the barrel, a perpetual outsider who always reached for the Golden Girls, the Brooks, the Bridgets, the Taylors, only to be burned by his own unworthiness. Sheila was the only woman who ever looked at him and saw a king. She loved him with a feral, unconditional intensity. And how did he repay her? By abandoning her the moment a respectable woman offered him a glance. Now he sits by her bedside for hours on end. He holds her cold, limp hand. He stares at the steady, mocking rise and fall of her chest, powered by machines, and he begs for a forgiveness she cannot grant. It is a Sisyphean punishment. He pushes the boulder of his guilt up the mountain every single day, whispering apologies into the sterile air of the intensive care unit, only for the boulder to roll right back down the moment he leaves the room. He is trapped in a dialogue with a void. I watched him stroke her hair today, and I felt a profound sense of pity for him. His pursuit of Taylor was, in his mind, a pursuit of goodness. He thought that by aligning himself with the world-renowned psychiatrist, the elegant, dignified Taylor Hayes, he could finally launder his own dirty soul. He thought he could outrun his past. But the past does not simply vanish because we wish it to. The past drives its car off a cliff and leaves us with a hospital bill. This brings me to Taylor Hayes, the healer, the woman who has built an entire career, an entire identity, on the foundation of psychological insight and moral superiority. How does she reconcile this? How does a doctor, a woman sworn to do no harm, live with the undeniable reality that her romance was the catalyst for another human being's total destruction? The cognitive dissonance must be deafening. Taylor stands in the doorway of that hospital room, watching the man she loves weep over the broken body of the woman he discarded for her. She tries to comfort him. She places a gentle hand on his shoulder, murmuring soft clinical platitudes about how it isn't his fault, about how Sheila was always unstable, but the words ring hollow, even to her. You can see it in her eyes, that terrifying, creeping realization that she is complicit. Taylor wanted Deacon. She allowed herself to be swept up in the intoxicating thrill of an illicit romance, perhaps to soothe her own bruised ego after years of losing Ridge to Brooke. But in taking Deacon, she took the only thing keeping Sheila tethered to the earth. Their new love, which just weeks ago felt like a triumphant, defiant rebellion against the judgmental eyes of Los Angeles, is now fatally poisoned. It is suffocating beneath the heavy, invisible weight of Sheila's silent presence. How do you build a future with a man who spends his evenings begging his comatose ex-wife for absolution? How do you kiss lips that have just finished whispering apologies to a ghost? You cannot. The relationship is already rotting from the inside out, infected by a guilt so pervasive it has become a third partner in their romance. I find myself reflecting heavily on the passage of time when I watch scenes like this. I have aged alongside these characters. My real life has evolved. I have moved homes, changed careers, experienced profound personal losses and quiet, unexpected joys. I have grown. Yet, I turn on my television, and I see these same beautiful, tragic figures, trapped in the exact same cycles of arrested development. Ridge is still somewhere across town, undoubtedly preparing to give a self-righteous lecture. Brooke is still obsessing over the romantic entanglements of everyone in her orbit. And Taylor is, once again, standing adjacent to a tragedy, trying to maintain her composure while her world quietly implodes. There is a surreal, almost voyeuristic grief in outgrowing a piece of media that refuses to outgrow you. I look at Taylor, and I do not just see a character. I see a manifestation of the human inability to learn from our own history. She is a woman who diagnoses trauma for a living, yet she is fundamentally incapable of diagnosing her own destructive patterns. She sought refuge in Deacon because he was safe, because he adored her. But she failed to calculate the collateral damage of that adoration. And now, they are all trapped. The hospital room has become a microcosm of their collective purgatory. The beeping of the heart monitor is the metronome of their suffering. Tick, tick, tick. Every beat is a reminder that Sheila is still here. She is not dead. She is merely suspended, a looming threat wrapped in white hospital sheets. What happens to a man when he is forced to live with the ghost of his own cruelty? Deacon is not a monster. That is what makes this so incredibly painful to watch. If he were a sociopath like Bill Spencer on his worst days, he might simply shrug this off, write a check, and walk away. But Deacon feels deeply. He is a man ruled by his emotions, by his desperate need to be loved and validated. He knows, with absolute certainty, that he broke Sheila. He knows that when she was at her lowest, most vulnerable point, he turned his back on her to bask in the warm, approving glow of Taylor Hayes. He is drowning in self-loathing. And Taylor, for all her psychiatric expertise, cannot throw him a life raft. Because to save him, she would have to absolve him. And to absolve him, she would have to admit that Sheila's life had value, a truth she has spent years aggressively denying. Let us pause and consider the sheer, terrifying isolation of Sheila Carter in this moment. Even in her vegetative state, she remains the most powerful force in the room. Her silence is louder than any of Taylor's psychological assessments. Her stillness is more violent than any weapon she has ever wielded. By simply existing in this liminal space between life and death, she has completely dismantled the fairy tale Deacon and Taylor were trying to write for themselves. I confessed earlier that I felt genuinely moved today. I know I am being emotionally manipulated by a team of writers who are simply trying to fill 18 minutes of airtime. I know the dramatic lighting, the swelling, melancholic background music, the perfectly timed tear rolling down Deacon's cheek. It is all a carefully constructed illusion. But the emotions it triggers in me are astonishingly real. It triggers a deep philosophical tangent in my mind about the nature of responsibility in relationships. When we leave someone, do we owe them a safe landing, or are we only responsible for our own trajectory? Deacon chose his own happiness. Is it a crime to want to be happy? Is it a crime to want to be with someone who brings out the best in you, rather than someone who constantly threatens to pull you into the dark? Logically, no. But logic has no place in the sterile, fluorescent-lit corridors of a hospital ward. When you see the direct, visceral consequence of your pursuit of happiness, when that consequence is a broken body attached to a ventilator, logic shatters. Deacon cannot rationalize his way out of this grief. Taylor cannot medicate it away. They are bound together now, not by love, but by complicity. The romance is no longer a defiant stand against the Forrester family's judgment. It is a shared prison sentence. Every time they look at each other, they will not see the promise of a bright future. They will see the jagged edge of the Malibu cliff. They will hear the screech of tires. They will smell the sterile, antiseptic air of the ICU. It is a remarkably bleak narrative choice, and I find myself simultaneously fascinated and exhausted by it. We watch daytime dramas for escapism. We watch them for the glamour, the ridiculous corporate takeovers, the dramatic slaps across the face at fashion shows. But every now and then, the show strips away the gloss and forces us to stare directly into the abyss of human misery. Sheila's coma is that abyss. And as the months drag on, as Kimberlin Brown shines on another network, we will be forced to watch Deacon slowly deteriorate. We will watch him lose his charm, his humor, his desperate optimism. We will watch him become a hollow shell of a man, keeping vigil over a woman who may never wake up to forgive him. And Taylor will slowly realize that she has won a prize she no longer wants. She fought the ghost of Sheila Carter and won, only to discover that the ghost has taken up permanent residence in her lover's heart. I wonder how long it will take for the resentment to build. How long before Taylor, exhausted by Deacon's endless mourning, snaps? How long before she tells him that Sheila made her own choices, that she drove that car off the cliff herself? And when she finally says it, when she finally voices the harsh, clinical truth, it will be the final nail in the coffin of their relationship, because Deacon does not want the clinical truth. He wants absolution, and Taylor cannot give it to him. It is a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions, playing out between commercial breaks for laundry detergent and life insurance. I sit here, my wine glass empty, the television screen now dark, and I am left with a profound sense of melancholy. I am grieving for Sheila, a character who has terrorized this fictional universe for decades, but who ultimately just wanted to be chosen. I am grieving for Deacon, a man who tried to climb out of the gutter only to realize he dragged someone else down in the process. And I am grieving for Taylor, a woman whose desperate need to be the good guy has blinded her to her own devastating flaws. But I suppose I'm asking too much from a daytime drama. I suppose I should just accept the soapy mechanics of it all. The convenient coma, the dramatic tears, the inevitable, eventual miraculous awakening years down the line when the network negotiates a new contract. Yet, I cannot dismiss the ache. Because, beneath the absurd tropes, beneath the repetitive set designs, and the melodramatic dialogue, there is a terrifying kernel of truth about the human condition. We are all just stumbling through the dark, desperately trying to find someone who will love us. And sometimes, in our desperate, clumsy pursuit of the light, we push the people who love us most right over the edge. We are all capable of profound cruelty, often disguised as self-preservation. As I wrap up my thoughts for tonight, I find myself lingering on that final shot of Deacon's hand clutching Sheila's. The contrast between his warm, trembling fingers and her pale, motionless skin. It is an image that will stay with me for a long time. It is a portrait of a man who has finally realized the true cost of his own desires. The cliffside crash was not just the end of Sheila Carter's reign of terror. It was the end of Deacon Sharp's innocence. And it was the beginning of a long, dark, suffocating winter for Taylor Hayes. They will try to move forward. They will try to build a life together. They will go out to dinners. They will smile for the cameras. They will pretend that they have survived the storm. But every night, when the lights go out and the silence settles in, they will hear it, the slow, rhythmic, mechanical breathing of the woman they left behind. Tick, tick, tick. Time stands still for Sheila Carter. But for Deacon and Taylor, time has become a torture device, measuring out their guilt in agonizing, inescapable increments. And we, the weary, complicit voyeurs, will be right here watching them drown. Thank you for joining me in this late night reflection. Sometimes you just need to sit in the quiet and acknowledge the heavy things. Until next time, take care of yourselves and be mindful of the edges you walk along.